Ever feel like, whoa, the world's gone a little crazy with
Yeah.
Bitcoin? I mean, one minute it's the future of finance, the next it's like crashing harder than my plans for a productive Monday morning.
Right.
But today, let's hit pause on all that noise. Yeah, go deeper.
Beeper.
We're diving into this article I found, and it argues that Bitcoin, get this, it isn't just another currency, it's like potentially the best money ever.
Ever. And it gets even wilder. This article goes way beyond the usual, should you buy Bitcoin headlines. This gets into some seriously big ideas, government control, personal freedom, even how this digital coin could change how humans act.
So buckle up, because we're about to explore if Bitcoin is just a passing fad or a glimpse into a whole new way of life.
Yeah, this isn't your average Bitcoin for beginners article. It's dense, thought-provoking.
Which is where we come in.
Exactly.
Think of us as your guides, sifting through the jargon, extracting those golden nuggets.
We'll break it down, connect the dots, hopefully leave you with some serious food for thought, right?
Love it. Okay, so this article, it jumps right into a question that honestly most of us probably haven't asked ourselves in a while. When was the last time you really thought about money?
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about that sinking feeling when you check your bank balance after a weekend splurge.
Right, right. It's easy to take money for granted, It's just there, this invisible force that drives all our transactions.
Invisible force, I like that.
But this article, it wants us to zoom out. Consider what money really is at its core.
Okay.
A system of power, values, incentives even.
That invisible force thing, though, that's spot on. We don't think about gravity until we trip and fall.
Yeah. Exactly. And just like if gravity changed, it'd turn our world upside down, right? Imagine a fundamental shift in our monetary system.
Why?
This article argues that everything is downstream of money.
Everything.
If the money's broken, everything else suffers.
Okay, before we go full matrix glitch here, give us a real-world example. What does that actually look like, this broken system messing with our lives?
Think about something everyone's feeling right now. Inflation. You're working hard, saving up for, say, that dream vacation, but every day your money buys a little bit less.
Tell me about it.
That dream trip keeps getting further out of reach, right? And it's not because you're not working hard enough, it's because the system itself is eroding your purchasing power.
Okay, yeah, I see where this is going. And this article definitely isn't shy about pointing fingers, especially when it comes to the role of government in all of this.
Yeah, the author believes that government intervention in the monetary system, it's a big part of the problem. They're advocating for a hands-off approach. Let the free market work its magic, even if it means things get a little messy sometimes.
Okay, so no safety nets, no bailouts, just pure, unadulterated economic Darwinism.
Well, they wouldn't use those terms. They call it creative destruction.
Creative destruction.
Sounds harsh, but the idea is for innovation to thrive, for new and better things to emerge, sometimes the old has to be swept away, even if it's painful in the short term.
So using that logic, governments propping up failing businesses or manipulating interest rates, that's actually doing more harm than good in the long run, even if the intentions are good.
That's the argument. They'd say it distorts the natural market forces, creates all these unintended consequences, and ultimately it hinders progress.
It's like meddling with a delicate ecosystem. Right? Even small changes can have huge ripple effects. But before we get into whether Bitcoin is, the answer here, I need a bit more context on this whole creative destruction thing. Give us an example we can all wrap our heads around.
Sure. Think about the rise of streaming services the one you're listening to right now.
A little sneaky.
It completely disrupted the entertainment industry, right? Traditional cable companies, they either had to adapt or die. And some literally went bankrupt.
Brutal.
It was a painful process, no doubt, but it also led to more choices, better technology, ultimately a better experience for consumers. Now imagine if the government had stepped in to save those struggling cable companies.
Right. Would we even have podcasts right now? Probably not. Okay, so that's the creative destruction side of things. But how does Bitcoin fit into this whole equation? Where does this magical internet money come in to save the day?
Bitcoin, according to the article at least, it's like the embodiment of creative destruction in action. It's a system that's decentralized, totally free from the meddling of governments and central banks.
Okay, so it's like the ultimate act of rebellion against, the man, the established financial order.
Yeah.
But before we get too caught up in the revolution, remind us again how this even works. How is Bitcoin actually decentralized?
So instead of relying on like a central authority, right? Bitcoin transactions, they're verified and recorded on this public ledger. It's called a blockchain. And that blockchain is maintained by this distributed network of computers all over the world.
Okay, so it's like a global spreadsheet that everyone can see, but no one can tamper with.
Yeah.
Gotcha. But back to the big picture here. This article, it goes even further, claiming Bitcoin isn't just about this whole decentralization thing. It's also about, wait for it, self-expression.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting, I think. The article argues that in a world dominated by fiat currency, which is, essentially government-issued money, we've kind of lost sight of money's potential as this tool for expressing our value, our individual values even.
Okay, I'm all for expressing myself, but usually I do that through, like, interpretive dance, not my bank account. Break this down for me. How is Bitcoin supposed to be more expressive than, say, my questionable dance moves?
Think about it this way. Every time you spend money, right, you're making a statement about what's important to you. Like, do you choose the locally sourced organic option at the grocery store, even if it's more expensive?
Guilty as charged.
Exactly. You're aligning your spending with your values. Now, imagine a world where your money isn't constantly losing value because of inflation.
Okay.
Suddenly, each purchasing decision carries even more weight, right? You're not being forced to spend just to keep pace with a depreciating currency.
So in this Bitcoin utopia, our spending becomes a much more conscious act of self-expression. I like it. But let's be real. Not all self-expression is created equal. What's to stop people from making reckless choices if we're all running wild in this Bitcoin-fueled world?
That's a valid concern. And to be fair, this article isn't advocating for reckless abandon or anything like that. It's more about like a more mindful approach to money, where individuals are empowered to make choices that are aligned with their long-term well-being and values.
It's like the old Spider-Man quote, right? With great power
Comes great responsibility.
Exactly. Speaking of responsibility, this article argues that Bitcoin could actually, like, rewire human behavior, impacting things like our time preference, even our sense of purpose. I'm starting to think this article was written by someone who's been mainlining Bitcoin and rainbows.
It does sound kind of radical, I'll grant you that. But hear them out. They argue that because Bitcoin is designed to be deflationary, meaning it holds its value over time, potentially even appreciates, it could encourage people to think more long-term.
Okay, so instead of that buy now before it's gone mentality fueled by inflation, we become a society of, like, patient investors, carefully planning for the future.
Exactly. They call this a shift in time preference. When you know your money will be worth more tomorrow, you're less likely to make impulsive decisions and more likely to save, invest, think about the long-term consequences of your choices, all that good stuff.
It's like the financial equivalent of choosing to eat your vegetables instead of that instant gratification donut, right? Not always easy, but ultimately better for you. But what about altruism? Can Bitcoin really make us more generous?
Well, the article argues that when people are struggling to make ends meet, just to get by, they have less mental bandwidth to think about others or give back to their communities.
Makes sense to me. If you're worried about putting food on the table, charity is probably not top of mind.
Right. But if Bitcoin creates this more stable financial environment, which is what the article is suggesting, it could free up people's resources, their mental energy even, potentially making them more open to helping others.
So instead of just focusing on keeping our own heads above water, we'd have more capacity to lift others up as well. Okay, I'm seeing the appeal, but this is some next level stuff. Okay, so Bitcoin fixes all our financial woes, makes us more patient and more generous. What's next? Am I going to find out it can solve world hunger and cure the common cold too?
Well, it's not quite that simple, but the article does go one step further, suggesting that a Bitcoin-powered world could even lead to a greater sense of purpose for people.
Okay, now you're just teasing me. How's a digital currency going to make life more meaningful?
Well, they argue that when you can break free from what they see as the shackles of a broken financial system, where you're constantly working just to outrun inflation, it frees up like mental and emotional energy to focus on things beyond just survival. It lets you, align your actions with your values in a more meaningful way.
So it's not just about the money itself, it's about what the money represents, like freedom, agency, the ability to kind of like shape your own destiny.
Exactly. And this ties into another fascinating point the article makes, that our current obsession with consumerism, it isn't inherent to capitalism itself. It's more like a symptom of a broken money system.
Okay, yeah, I've definitely been guilty of some late-night online shopping sprees, but hey,
Yeah.
I'm blaming the system, not my lack of willpower. But seriously, Explain this one to me.
Sure, when money is constantly losing value, it encourages people to spend it quickly, to accumulate things, almost like a desperate attempt to, maintain their purchasing power.
Because who knows what that pile of cash will be worth next year, right? Better to turn it into something tangible before it evaporates.
Exactly. But in this world with a deflationary currency like Bitcoin, that incentive to just constantly spend, it diminishes. You're no longer racing against inflation, so you can actually be more thoughtful about your purchases.
Okay, I'm starting to get the bigger picture here. It's not just about the nuts and bolts of how Bitcoin works. It's about the potential ripple effects on our entire culture. Instead of shop till you drop, it becomes more about quality over quantity, right? Experiences over possessions, investing in things that truly matter.
Right. It's a shift away from short-term gratification towards this long-term thinking, from material accumulation to a more mindful approach to consumption in general.
So less Black Friday madness, more community gardens and local farmers markets. I gotta admit, it's an appealing vision. But let's be real, a lot of this is theoretical. We're talking about a massive shift in how society functions. Is this Bitcoin utopia even remotely realistic?
Whether Bitcoin itself is the answer is almost beside the point. This article, it's not trying to offer some concrete roadmap for the future. It's more like it's challenging us to just reimagine what's possible. It's a thought experiment, if you will.
I like that, a thought experiment.
Yeah.
It's not about blindly accepting all these claims, but using them as a springboard to examine our own relationship with money and how that shapes our lives.
Precisely. This article, whether you agree with its conclusions or not, it forces us to confront some pretty fundamental questions. What is money? What role should it play in our lives? And, what kind of future do we want to create with it?
It's a lot to process. We've gone from the technical intricacies of blockchain to existential questions about purpose and meaning all in one episode.
And that's the beauty of a good deep dive, right? We've only barely scratched the surface here, but hopefully we've provided enough food for thought to keep the conversation going long after this episode ends.
Exactly. So to our listeners, if this deep dive has sparked even a flicker of curiosity, don't let it end here. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and hey, who knows, maybe you'll be the one to write the next chapter in this whole unfolding story of money and its impact on humanity. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.